Hello, Lucy here. I'd love for you to help spread the word. There are several ways that you can do this. One, you can subscribe to the podcast on your favourite platform, which will ensure that you never miss an episode. Two, you could share it with your friends, your family, your colleagues who might be inspired by the stories that we're sharing. Three, your reviews and ratings are incredibly important. They help new listeners discover the podcast and they give me valuable feedback on how I can improve. So, please take a moment to leave a review. Your support is what makes this possible. I'm on a mission to inspire, motivate and empower fellow creatives to take the road less travelled, and I am so grateful to have you along on this journey with me. Okay, let's get to the episode. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Wilderness of Creativity with my childhood friend of 30 years, Jennifer Crow. Jen is a passionate vocal teacher whose artistic journey began at just 7 years old when she was captivated by a choir at a classical concert. This experience really sparked a lifelong love of singing, which led to her joining various training and performance choirs throughout her youth, including Cantamas, which is a renowned name in the world of choral music and has a rich history of fostering the talents of young singers. Now, although Jen took a 17-year detour in her career working at sea, she did maintain a deep sense of connection to music, and she has recently established Singsmith Studio, where she's now helping others to discover their unique voices across all different styles of music, from rock, pop, musical theatre and classical. In this episode, Jenny and I talk about the power of long-term friendships and how creativity plays a role in maintaining those long-term commitments. We also talk about the influence of education on creativity and the valuable lessons that Jenny has learned from the inspiring women in her life. Right, let's get to the episode.
It was really nice. It's so nice to check in, isn't it? We check in, every 4 to 6 weeks, probably? And we always, for years now, we've booked the next get-together at the end of our existing get-together. And that has just rolled really nicely.
It's just something to look forward to. When I know that life is pretty busy for all of us, because we've all got different commitments, we've all got different pressures and things that we're dealing with, but actually knowing that I'm going to see you guys and I'll be able to check in and just come back to myself as well, I think is so important. So yeah, it was really nice. So for those of you who are listening, I'm chatting to my very good friend, childhood friend, Jenny. She is just one of my favorite human beings on the planet, and our friendship spans 30 years now, Jen?
I dread to think about it, but since we were 8, I think.
It's just been such a nourishing friendship for us, I think. We've kind of gone off on different paths, and we'll talk about that. But it's just been life-changing and life-affirming as well.
Yeah. I think it's definitely kept us both steady through the years when there's somebody who knows you that well and is willing to challenge you. Then when you go to them and you say, it's a bit like, it's rather better than talking to Reddit, isn't it? And you go, am I mad here? Am I the asshole? And the person will be like, yes. Or no, I don't. That sounds unreasonable. Can you give me more context? What's going on here? And then we just sort of reflect with each other, and that's really, really helpful because I trust your and Amy's opinions.
Do you want to very briefly talk about your sort of education background and your career, because you've made quite big changes over the last few years, but I think your career path has been really varied, undeniably creative in the way that you've dealt with change, and certainly what you're doing now with your singing tutoring as well. So do you want to just give a little bit of background of what your wilderness looks like? Keep it clean.
It looks like a briar-strewn path, I think is my wilderness. Fork in the road as an octopus of paths. And I've taken all of them. I don't know what I'm doing. This seems to work out. So, yeah, I started out thinking I'd do I don't know, I thought I was gonna do music. Then I decided I didn't wanna be poor. So I did literature thinking I'd do an office job, realized I hated, go management style, realized I hated working in an office. Did a degree in computer science to top that up and give me, I thought I was going to be technical author, and then ended up on a boat doing oil and gas exploration.
And there you have it.
Yeah, 17 years or so. And then I quit that to become a singing teacher because I've got money from oil and gas behind me to allow me to transition. So it's not easy breaking into a new career, but I did save specifically to do it. So that's where that's gone from. But yeah, my education doesn't match any,
No.
any of the and my expertises.
Expertises.
Expertise.
I love that.
Yeah, I was a chief navigator in offshore oil and gas, so that sort of like a chief hydrographer, I suppose, hydrographic surveyor. Don't have any qualifications in that, and I am doing a qualification in teaching singing, but yeah.
You've, as you said right at the start, you're always very open-minded. You like to try different things. You you have that financial sort of stability as well, which you've kind of, you've invested in property, and you've been very forward-thinking when it comes to planning your life, I guess, in some ways, even though it seems that you've done lots of different things, but actually you have been led by how you feel and what you want to do, and that sort of creative spark that you have, because I would say you're very creative.
Yeah, I think so. It doesn't feel so a lot of the time. It took me a long time to accept that I have creative thoughts, not necessarily creative output. Like I don't, do crafts or things like that. But when I've done academia my whole life separately to work, and I generally hit on something that's an interesting thought that's not been seen from that perspective before, and should probably do some publishing, which I haven't done, but
Is that something you'd like to do?
I would like to. It's very hard to get published in academia. And sometimes, when I finish the degree, one of the reasons I do a degree is because it's got an end. And I like that. But that does mean that I tend not to go back and go that I should publish that, because it means sort of rehashing something that I feel like I'm finished with. But some of my friends were like 8 years on from that degree, and they're like, "Have you published that essay on the Swan yet?" And I'm like, "No," and they still remember that essay, which I think is fairly like, well, maybe I should. It obviously stayed with some of them, so I probably should. So creative thoughts rather than necessarily, and creative interactions. That took me a long time to accept that I don't build things like my mum does, but I have a creative insight with people, and that feeds into my teaching.
Explain to me a little bit more about creative interactions. What do you mean by that?
Finding a way to access with that person what they need to hear in what order to get them where they need to go. Because singing teaching is very, very personal, it's very vulnerable for the person who's listening as well as yourself, the person who's singing as well as yourself. And so they often have mental blocks. So singing is very much a mental game as well as a physical game. And so you have to kind of put those two in balance and sort of judge what that person is overcoming at that moment. Is it a physical problem, or is it best approached from a mental position? And it's yeah, it can take a little bit of doing that, but I really, really enjoy that aspect of it.
And you've set up Singsmith recently. This is your you've got a website, and you're offering vocal coaching for a variety of people from all different backgrounds, all different abilities, ages. How does it feel now doing something that actually you started off with when you were yourself 13 in Cantarmus?
Really weird. Really weird. Because this is what I always wanted to do. And I was talking to some people at conference this year about it, how I always wanted to be a singing teacher. I didn't want to be a performer. And when I was 18 or so, singing teaching was only for dropout performers. And I hated that. I was like, I don't want to perform. I don't want to be a dropout performer. There was very little guidance to help you be a better teacher, and sort of formats and heuristics to help you. And now there's not many programs, but there are a few programs, and they're really coherent. They're really good. And the face of singing teaching has changed in 20 years. And it's fantastic. It used to be very competitive. Like, I wouldn't tell you about this person because then they might go to you. Whereas now I can say, okay, I'm having an issue with a student, which I think is very specialist. I know a specialist. I'll get them on Zoom and we'll do a class together and we'll address this. And it's just so much more community minded, and we're all here to help each other, and we're all here to help the student get the best out of this. And I love the new dynamic.
And you know what, Jenny, as well, you have always been so driven and focused by this sense of community. You know, if I think about your friendships as well and how you've developed that sense of community with all of your different groups of friends, what is it that holds all of those things together? Like, what is it about community that you really love?
That's a tricky question, but I think probably that's a reflection of family. Like, so you know my family very well, and I love my family. I'm very blessed with my family, and I kind of want to share that the things I've learned from my strong family. It's not to say it's a family without issues. We have issues, but we work through them, and we try, and we come up with strategies to work through them. And so I try and apply those things I've learned to my friendship groups, because it's just such a blessing, and it's so nice to have good, healthy relationships which span through the years. Like I say, we know each other so well, partly because we've known each other so long. So there's real value in having gone through all those life transitions together. And so it makes it worth plowing your time into community. And I just love it. It's really good.
It is really good. I mean, I definitely would say that with the podcast, I have found that my community is now growing, and it's really reaffirming and so valuable, because I would never have made the connections that I've made now in my day-to-day life if I didn't have the podcast. And I think by doing things creative like this, for example, for myself, it has opened up doors. It has opened up those connections. And I suppose you find the same with your singing, with your reading groups that you have, because you've always read so much. Like, your knowledge of different authors and books absolutely astounds me. I wish that I had your brain.
You read more widely than I do. I just read lots of fantasy books.
Yeah, what draws you to the fantasy books?
Definitely the other world. Like, it's so different from our world. I don't generally want to be kind of involved. I saw you looking at the biography section in Waterstones yesterday. I thought that was really interesting, because I never read biographies. I never read autobiographies because they're too real. Like, they're here. When I read fantasy, I want to be elsewhere. I'm obsessed with the ACOTAR, the Sarah J. Maas verse, all the ACOTAR Tog, Throne of Glass series, and all of that lot, affectionately known as fairy smut. It's great.
Fairy smut? I've never read any fairy smut.
Oh, romantasy. The romantasy is the slightly more polite way of putting it.
I prefer fairy smut.
Yeah, it's kind of condescending to it, actually, but I still quite like it. I still quite like it. So, but yeah, it's a little condescending, because even to have its own section called romantasy instead of fantasy is a bit othering, and it's othering it because it's for the female gaze. And I'm like, well, but it's still fantasy, and there's always some romance. Like, I've read fantasy since I was a child. There was always some romance in it. And the romance might have gotten a little bit spicier. Like, sometimes it gets very spicy, but mostly it's a little bit spicier. But really, it's no different to the male authors of the 1980s writing some relationship here and there. But we've now given its own little section, and we've called it romantasy, which is very much like saying it's not a film, it's a chick flick. So there's a little bit of that going on. But still, I quite like the name Fairy Smut, so I'll stick with it.
I think definitely. I mean, you know, with reading so much, you know, I would say this, your vocabulary is so wide and broad, and you understand. I mean, obviously, people won't know this, but you know, you've studied Viking. How would I describe it?
It's a Viking and Anglo-Saxon Studies is the name of the degree, which is actually changed post that point. I would like to point out for any American listeners. It's now early medieval studies, Viking and early medieval studies, because the Brits didn't realise that Anglo-Saxon was being used as a racist term in America. So now the name of the degree has changed, but unfortunately it's still on my degree certificate that it's Viking and Anglo-Saxon.
And so you've studied kind of like the foundation of language. And so when we're having conversations, I mean, you can imagine myself, Jenny, and Amy having good old good old chinwags. We do talk about all sorts of things, but over a glass of wine. And someone will mention something, and Jenny will just come in with, did you know that actually stems from, and then go into this wonderful spiel about where a word comes from and the history of it, and then link onto the politics of that country or whatever. Like, honestly, you inspire me every single day. The knowledge that you have, and surely with knowing so much about so many different things, Jenny, that inspires your creative thinking.
I think so, because I can always bring something new to the table, but I feel like I know nothing. I think the more you study, the more you realise you know very, very little. So I've only studied to several subjects to master's level, and all it does is just let me know how little I know. You start to plumb the depths, and you realise there's a void underneath you, and you're, oh Lord, there's so much to know. And even at master's level, you start specialising. So with early medieval studies, a lot of people sort of expect me to know about the Norse gods, but I don't know any more about the Norse gods than the average person. A couple of names, a few bits and bobs. It wasn't my area of study. I did some place name studies. I did some offshore language, so the language of the sea, things like that. So it's already specialising. So
if anyone's listening and you do know a little bit more about Norse gods, please do get in touch. Do you know, it's so funny because we do have listeners in America. We've got listeners in Norway. We've got listeners in Mexico, India, New Zealand. Like, honestly,
that's fantastic.
I know the wilderness is spreading far and wide. It's just amazing, really. I've just posted something on Instagram to say, teacher by day, podcaster by night and weekends, and in the like any other time. We're very similar in the sense that we love learning.
Yes.
And we love to feel like we are ever evolving.
Yeah.
And that's something that, very much drives me, and I know drives you as well. I guess it comes down to those values that we share in our friendship and as individuals as well. So yeah, it's something that, I don't know, enriches our friendship, and I feel like I'm always learning from you. Yeah, I mean, even yesterday when we were chatting about something, and you just chip in with, when you're dealing with a particular situation that you're finding quite challenging, you just went, well, yeah, of course, lead with feelings, then go facts, then go proposed ideas or suggestions, and then go whatever it was, the last thing that you said, can't remember.
Consequences. Feelings, facts, proposals, consequences. Yeah, it's good format for dealing with tricky situations.
Yeah, but like, we haven't always seen eye to eye, and you're not going to see eye to eye with your friends the whole time, and that's the whole point, that you find friendships friends that you can rub along with, but also that are going to challenge you. But being open-minded and talking about how we feel about things, and then talking about those facts and those particular experiences that we've had together, they're all part and parcel of, growing in a friendship. You don't have to kind of go down and do crafts with each other every weekend.
Yeah.
You can be creative in your communication. You can be creative in the way that I don't know. Like just the other day when we went to Amy's doing the escape room.
Oh yeah, that was great fun.
It's just having things like that. And I remember when we went to Amsterdam, we'd done a lot of the sightseeing, and then you said, I've downloaded the tour. Can you remember?
Oh yes. Yeah, we had a blast.
Yeah. So it's little things like that where we're just, reading some clues and trying to figure it out, and it's a little bit like life.
Yeah, it suits us. I like that we're all plugged in at the same sort of stage as well. So whenever we travel together or have an evening together or weekend together or whatever, we always are on the same level where we're like, do you just want to do lunch today, girls? Yeah, we just want to do lunch. Oh, do you want to do this, then a film? Yeah, let's do this. Or do you want to have a really hard day where we hit 3 things and we go on a tour and we walk for 3 hours? Yeah, we're always on the same level. But even if we weren't, we would definitely be like, actually, I'm a little bit tired for that. And I love that we can have these wonderfully honest communications, which are entirely respectful, and just, we never take things personally. Even when we've had the odd fight, we're not taking it personally. We're just having a bit of a miscommunication breakdown where where we just feel for it until we get there. So I quite like flights with you.
And the thing is as well, I mean, like, what lessons have you learned through the connections that you've had with the women in your life?
Oh yeah, the women in my life are really impressive. I guess I learnt to take care of yourself. I probably learned that from the men and the women in my life. Um, to plan effectively, um, and to always, yeah, probably that's where the community thing comes from. Always put your time and attention into community, your maid family and your family by blood, because they are the ones who will come back around for you in time. And it's that circular kind of motion, isn't it? Where we feel like we're in it together. And the women in my family very much sort of peak and trough with life in a very female way. I've watched the women in my life go through menopause and go through having children. I've watched women in my life lose children, and we face this together, and that's really hard. But we face it together, and that commitment. When you go along, you're like, I don't know what to say, I, but I'm here, and if there's something I can do better, this is what I'm thinking to do. But if I can do something better, do please let me know.
Mm.
And meanwhile, I'm going to do this. And yeah, we fight for our community in that way.
I absolutely love women.
Yeah, they're great. They're great. Honestly, the most difficult thing about being offshore all those years was it's male dominated. I mean, I love men. I love working with men. We had a wild time. But I used to have like girls' night before I left and girls' night when I came back because I'm like, I need more estrogen in this atmosphere.
I need to plug in.
Yeah. I've spent a lot of time in stand-up arguments, girls. I need just need to be kind.
What did you discover when you were about yourself when you were in those sort of male-dominated environments?
I think probably the most important thing is I realised very much I'm not a mini man. I I think when I was growing up, I used to think gender was entirely a social construct. And as I grew older um, and lived and especially discovered the trans people, I realized it's not a social construct. There is something about gender. And I don't have all the answers. I don't know what it is. But when you work offshore in a male dominated environment, there's a lot of pressure to be a mini man. Yes, you can be good, you can be competent, but why aren't you shouting at your team? I'm not going to shout at my team. They're not children. Several of these men are older than me and have grown children. I'm not I'm not a mini man. I'm doing it my way. And I might be slightly more aggressive than the average woman, and a slightly more I take more risks I take financial risks, I take risks with life. I'm more of a risk taker than average, I think. But that still doesn't make me a mini man. I'm still a woman, and I'm still going to do it in a feminine way, and that's I can operate in a science related field, in a scientific field, as a woman. There is no problem here. There is nothing lesser. There is nothing that I need to add to be there. So that was difficult. Bringing feminism to a international crew offshore was interesting,
Yeah, I bet it was.
but we managed.
How did you tap into your creativity at that point? Because you would have been very, very busy.
Yes, but it was creative. And I think that probably was the secret. I went in with a background in literature and a master's in computer science, which was the technical degree that got me my foot in offshore. And I realized that a lot of the thinking could be very much I science, so I write. And I'm like, well, that's not logical, and that's not in order, and it's not keeping a log of what problem solving has been done in what order to discover we don't want to be repeating the same problem solving. So I did an enormous amount of ordering of documents and training, and putting things and then training people to put things in a distinct order, and that came from my literature. That's the ability to think from A to B in a clear line with clear outcomes. That was literature, not science. And that was really powerful because that got me to the top very quickly because I could sort of think my way from A to B in a very ordered fashion. And then because you're essentially battling the sea all the time, the sea will always throw new things at you. It's a natural environment. It will be like, oh, and now this is tearing you up. Okay, good. What are you going to do? So you'd have to creatively think about what you were going to do with that situation, and cooperate, of course, with all the other departments on board to come to the best solution for the vessel. So yeah, it was a very creative environment, and I think a lot of scientists don't give themselves credit for how creative they are.
Yeah, it appears in everything, I think, in everything that we do. It's just that I suppose in the education system is that we try and compartmentalize it all and we go, well, creativity is just for the arts. Or, you might see creativity in English when you're writing and you're advertising campaigns in English language, or when you're interpreting novels in English literature or whatever. But it does appear in science and maths. I mean, maths is incredibly creative.
Hugely so. But I think a lot of scientists and mathematicians sort of think they're super logical, and of course they are. Logic is highly involved, but to get to new answers, that there will always be creativity. And I think they sort of, in rejecting that about themselves, sometimes that can cause problems. So yeah, and also in dealing with people like that, because they want to think they're very emotionless and logical, but actually they are being driven by emotion and creativity and their needs to be creative. So approaching them as a creative person is a more successful strategy than trying to outlogic them.
Mm.
And I found that successful as well. Attending to their needs, attending to the creative output that they required. So instead of beating my guys over the head, my team over the head, and being like, well, no, you're not doing that because this is not this is not the outcome we're trying to achieve today. I made space for them to have their creative needs met, and sort of say, X hours of day, is your project, whatever project you want to do. Like, I will make space, I will come down, I will sit at the desk, so that you can be free to do that. And we just made space for people to express their creativity, to do what they felt like they wanted to do. And that just produced much better outcomes for everybody, much happier vessel, much happier team, much more integrated. And sometimes the outcomes of those creative projects was really valuable. The point was not to be valuable, but sometimes it was really valuable.
The more people I talk to outside of the arts about creativity, the more I'm realizing how wrong we've got it in education. And I'm a teacher and I'm banging my head against the wall. I'm like, this is rubbish.
Just, the art science divide, which is not a real thing, and drives me insane. So I didn't do science until I was 21, and I did my degree in computer science. I felt my brain changing. It was such a fast change. I felt my brain changing. It was a disaster for my health for that year, because I was just like fizzing. But since then, since that adjustment, I've absolutely loved it. And it's just education. It's, how much time. There's no such thing as being good or bad at anything. There is the amount of attention you give that thing.
Yes.
So, people are like, oh, you're naturally good at literature. No, I read loads. That's it. And I sat down and talked with my family all the time. So of course I'm good at literature and comprehension and reading comprehension and making arguments. I sat and argued with my family every day. So that's the amount of attention I gave to it. If my family were more into maths, I might have sat down and done maths more often and played maths games with them and done these things. And then I would have been naturally good at maths. I'm not naturally good at anything. You are essentially what you give your attention to.
I think what my concern is, Jen, is that, you and I and Amy, we were very much sort of at home with our parents, and each other's parents, talking, conversing, exploring, all the time. And I think what I worry about is there are so many children out there that just don't have that input. And I'm not saying, I'm not blaming anybody. It's just an observation. There just doesn't seem to be that time within the family setup anymore to focus on and give that attention, because parents are working so hard.
Yeah.
They're working so many jobs to pay the bills, and they're doing overtime, they're working shifts. That evening time when we would sit down and have our evening meal together, that doesn't happen because there's work to be finished in the evening, so it is a concern. And I'm thinking, well, where do they get that time, that attention? Because there's no time in the curriculum either.
No, I don't know, and I feel it as well. We could talk about community again and those extended family networks. I spend a fair amount of time with the kids in my family and my extended family and with my friends, some of my friends' children, and I like to spend that time really with them. So I prefer to kind of like if I'm babysitting my godchildren to go and babysit them, and mum and dad go out and we'll play games and we'll do reading and we'll watch a film together or something like that. Or I always bring something round that we can make or do, something like that. Really spend the time with them, because parents are pressed at the moment, but you do often have people in your life who are kind of extra and can plow in some of that time and attention that kids really require. And I enjoy it, and it's it'll hopefully come back. It gives me something for the kids to latch onto, because when they, I play board games with my nephews and my niece a lot,
Yeah.
and when they are 20 or something, and maybe they go to uni, or maybe they do apprenticeships, or maybe they do something. I don't know what they're going to do, but I'm sure they're going to go wild, and I look forward to this. But they'll dump me for like 5 years. They'll definitely dump me because they'll be off doing their stuff, and then one day they'll be like, "Oh God, I really love Auntie Jenny, and actually it's been years since I've seen her. What can I do?" Well, I'll ring her and ask if she wants to play a board game, because we've got that kind of shared history and that shared thing that we like to do. So there's that, and I hope that it gives them something to get a grip on. But yes, I do completely understand, and I really feel for people that work outside of the home has consistently robbed people of more and more time, and not just their time, but because of the intensity of work these days, where in a typical office day 20 years ago, you might do 3 hours work because you sat by the water cooler, as the Americans would say, but you shot the breeze, you talked, you did stuff, you took a slightly longer lunch, you did these things. And now it's very much like, how can we squeeze 8 hours of work out of you out that day, preferably 9 if we actually go over your lunch hour as well. And so people are so tired by the time they get home. That's really robbing their time as well. And I feel very, very bad for people that they're in that situation.
And the thing is, as well, is that you've worked the hours, Jenny, and now you're reaping the seeds you've sown, because you're now flexible in your working day, in the way that you plan your weeks. I mean, just the other day you were saying, I want to be able to go out for lunch. I want to be able to go and see my friends, and I can just sit if I want to. I mean, sitting and doing nothing. Oh,
What a privilege. Yeah.
it really is.
I did burnout twice, so yeah. In exchange for this. But yes, yeah. And I did intend to slow down from this age. The price that was exacted from me for working offshore all those years was a heavy price, but I'm reaping the benefits of it now. And yeah, it's hard to regret it when it's worth so much, when the world is going increasingly intense and I'm reducing intensity in my early 40s. That is a massive privilege.
Burnout can show up in lots of different ways. You can have lots of different symptoms, signs of that. So, if there is anyone that's listening who is experiencing perhaps signs of burnout, there are places to go and lean in and talk to people who you trust. Did you end up going to the doctor about it?
Uh, yes. Yeah. Not the first time. I think the first time I didn't actually burn out. I just came very, very close, and I quit just before. I
Yeah.
felt my mood flip on a dime, and it really went just like bing, and it was like a literal weight had come off my shoulders. But there was no reason. I was at work, and that just went bing, and I was like, "That's not right. That's my mental health. You don't have that, you don't have anything, really." So I quit, and I did a degree for a year, which was absolutely great. Reset, and then ended up going back to my old job, but in a different, slightly adjacent career. And I did that for 5 years. And I spent 4 months in bed after I finished that, so that wasn't great. But I'd already seen the doctor, and the doctor, I was in a terrible mood and stuff, and he's like, "Well, you've got, it's depression, ME, or burnout. And I was like, well, I can quit my job. He's like, I really think you could just take 4 months off. And I was like, all right, I can quit my job. And he's like, ah. So I quit my job. It was planned. It was all, I
It
was
was planned.
en route. I do believe firmly, years ago, I decided for myself that don't be unhappy for more than a year. Like, we're all adults, so you might need a year to, sometimes you have a price to pay for a greater benefit at the end. But ultimately, it's also, you only get one life. If you're not religious like me anyway, you only get one life, one turn of this wheel. So you cannot be unhappy for more than a year, because it is such a waste of such precious time that if you're unhappy for a year, make a plan and get out. Nothing matters more than your happiness.
Watching you emerge so much happier and healthier and more, I don't know, joyful as well. Like you bring joy to the party, Jen. You both do, both you and Amy, and you lift me up. And I just think, like you say, it's so important. Like, don't compromise on your health and your happiness. Because you can, I don't know, create space, like you say, create more time for yourself. But it's what you give that attention to, isn't it? It's like being purposeful in it,
Yeah.
and not just wander down the path of people's expectations, of your own expectations of yourself and the life that you thought you were going to lead. And
Financial traps, I think, are one. Like, usually you can make compromises. Like, I have a very nice house now, and when I quit my job, I know I might not be able to keep this house. The finances have another 1 or 2 years to make sense, and if they don't, I'll have to sell the house. I love the house, but I don't love the house more than I love having this time and not being burnt out anymore. So maybe I have to sell the house. That's a choice. So you've got to be careful, I think, about financial traps, that they seem like once you set foot down the root of something, like you'll never get yourself out of that. But you can. It's a year to make a plan, and start the plan. It might take longer than a year for the plan to come through, but you have to make a plan to get out of it. If you're trapped with a car finance, if your mortgage is too big, you can start to, it can literally be going on Rightmove and just checking out other areas and just looking at those houses on Rightmove and being like, actually, I don't really like it, but it's not that bad. It, something as simple as that. You don't have to take the action today. You just have to start thinking about it. Yeah, and that's the start of a plan.
yeah. And what's the plan for Singsmith? So do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about how you set that up and what you offer as well? Because there'll be people out there that are interested in you lead online sessions, so people can do it wherever they are, obviously depending on the time zones and everything.
Although since you've got listeners in other countries, my online booking system accommodates other time zones, so it'll give it you
Amazing.
in your time. So
Oh.
yeah, so you will get a real. I made sure of that because, of course, all my friends are, well, not all my friends, but a lot of my friends are international. So so I was conscious of time zones when I went into this. But yeah, I set it up, a little over a year ago, because I decided I just wanted to, like, a studio these days is basically an online platform where I can say, use Zoom or use Skype, or come in person if you're local, and we'll just have a 30-minute or 1 hour lesson. I do generally say sort of 30 minutes for the first lesson, because it can be very anxiety inducing, and that can be very tiring. Like, the first time you meet somebody, just meeting somebody new, and then doing something as vulnerable as singing in front of them, which, don't worry, I put people at their ease. I've got that down. But we're not. But it's very anxiety inducing, so that's tiring. So I suggest for a first meeting, just book in for half an hour, and thereafter we'll do 1 hour lessons when you know what a lesson looks like, and you're more comfortable with it. And people are always surprised at how much we can achieve. Like I say, the landscape of teaching singing has changed so much in the last 20 years. We can achieve a lot in 30 minutes or an hour. And I love it. I love it that one of my favorite things to do is teach people who can't pitch. I love teaching people to pitch because it's such a life-changing thing. If if they only get as far as being able to pitch and suddenly being able to join in with a local choir or a local church or a local band or a local singing session or karaoke, that is a massive life change. And it's not that hard to teach.
So can everyone sing?
Broadly, yes. Tone deafness does exist. But no one who is tone deaf would ever ask for singing lessons. There is no such thing as being tone deaf for singing only. There is tone deafness, and you can tell if somebody's tone deaf because they don't listen to music. They don't like it because it's just like white noise to them. It just irritates them. So if you enjoy music, you are not tone deaf. That's it. So what you are is you can't pitch. And that is a distinct thing. It is a skill that we learnt as children because our parents sing, and we did lots of singing things when we were children.
Yeah, sang in the choir.
Yeah, we simply learnt it as children. If you missed that, probably because your family weren't very musical, or somebody told you at school that you couldn't sing, which is a very common thing to happen, it can be corrected. It doesn't even take long. Like, most of my students learn around 3 to 6 months, depending on how hard they work and their confidence and so on, their growing confidence. But yeah, 3 to 6 months-ish.
How do you learn to pitch then?
You start, it's a specific order. So first off, you need to understand the psychology of it a little bit. There's a separate cortex in your brain deals with the human voice and song, and it is not the same place as your auditory cortex, which is part of the problem. So that's why people who have strokes can sometimes be taught to speak again. If they lose their ability to speak, they can be taught to speak again by singing, because they're in different parts of the brain, completely different parts of the brain. Some people with stutters are taught to stop their stuttering by singing, because they don't stutter when they sing.
Yes.
Different part of the brain. So what you need to understand when you're pitching is that it is absolutely vital. The step most people have missed is you have to pitch to the human voice, not to a piano, not to a guitar. That is going through a different part. It's being processed by a different part of your brain. So it's too hard work for you to figure that out, send it to the vocal cortex, and then come back to your larynx. It's too much work. So you have to pitch to a human voice. Then we start pitching to a piano as well, because that helps. It helps with your exercises. It helps with going forward. But yeah, that's the key. The critical component is pitch to a human voice. The second component is that most people don't understand that you and I, before we sing something, we do hear the note inside our head. We probably don't notice that we do, but we do. Just a fraction, and it's not the whole thing, but just a fraction before we start singing, we'll hear the note. So when you teach people to learn to pitch, you encourage them, you literally say, okay, I'm going to sing this. Now hear it echo in your head. Literally hear it, pattern it, hear it in your head, hear my voice, and then sing it. And suddenly people are like, was that right? And you're, yes. Can you hear it's right? Because you can hear it coming out and then coming back through your ears. You can hear it. And they're just getting it. Like, oh my God. You're like, yeah, it's so much fun. About half of my students are men. And that's unusual amongst my colleagues. And we have an absolute blast. I'm not that surprised because, of course, I spent all my years offshore. And I think a lot of singing teachers are dominated by women. That most singing teachers are women. And I think a lot of them worry about teaching men because, of course, we sing in a different pitch. But even when I'm teaching men to pitch, we manage. It's absolutely fine. I've ended up with quite a lot of male students and quite a lot of metalheads. And I teach vocal effects, and I absolutely love it. I have a blast because, of course, I was a metalhead when we were young, and I used to work in Rock City. So I get these guys turn up, and they're like, "Yeah, I want to sing, Slipknot or Alice in Chains or something." I'm like, "Awesome! I love this." Yes. It's great fun. But yeah, I teach pop, rock, musical theatre, and classical. Except nobody wants to learn classical anymore. So if anybody else there wants to learn classical, I'm dying for some classical students.
It's so rewarding, isn't it? I know. I mean, obviously, you come from a family of teachers, and I know for a fact you are an incredible teacher because from lots of things that we've talked about already, you understand how to connect with people. to meet them where they are. And you have a whole host of skills that you can draw upon to make what you're teaching accessible. So if people want to sign up to a class, a 30-minute session with you, and then obviously look at maybe a program of sessions, they can find you at singsmith.com. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
So people can sign up there, and I'm excited for you.
Thank you.
I really am.
Good job.
Good job.